low 30s at night.
Wow.
Cool.
I wasn't quite ready for that, but that's okay.
I'm fascinated to hear about this because my husband and I just started cycling this year and we love it.
Oh, neat.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, I was driving and then had a mountain bike with me. So, yeah, short rides, but yeah, it's great.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did you guys do with those 3 sessions? Do you guys have any questions? I saw that Emily has a question on the depression one.
Yeah, and I think as I'm thinking through it also could have been related to miscarriage or infertility, but just best ways to be encouraging but without dismissing it, like for short interactions. Like I don't want to be intrusive or to come across that way, but also encouraging but not dismissive, so I just don't know how to balance those things.
And also, you don't want the only interactions you have with them to only ever be about all the terrible stuff they're going through.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, here I am seeing you in the hallway once a month in church, and all we ever talk about is how you're still not pregnant yet, or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So what do you think? What have you tried in the past?
I feel like I end up being exactly what you just said, where I just end up not talking about it. I'm like, let's talk about happier things, but like that's not always helpful either. It just feels very shallow, but I don't know.
Yeah. Ladies, Kim and Susan, do you have any suggestions?
I think it's hard.
I think maybe saying, I don't want every conversation that we have to be about this one subject, but maybe we should sit down sometime when we can really talk about it. But know this, I am praying for you, and how's the rest of your life going? Instead of that one particular, whether it's depression or whatever it is. But I think making the opportunity to have the longer conversation, otherwise it will be a series of those short conversations and you never will have the opportunity to really talk about it. I don't know. That's what comes to my mind.
I agree. That's what I was thinking too, is like, I would ask them, what is the most loving way that I can interact with you? Because I want to love you. I don't want to be annoying to you.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think I realized how every second of every day for someone who's infertile becomes consumed with their infertility treatments. Like, hearing that in Amy's session was really good for me to know, because like literally their entire life is wrapped up in trying to conceive, and it goes on for years. And so maybe one of the ways that would be loving and helpful is if you were a friend that reminded them that there's life outside of all of those treatments. But I think in any case, you're going to have to ask them, like, how can I love you? How can I be supportive? How can I be encouraging? Is there something I can do to help you right now? I found myself asking that question more than any other question in the last several years. Like, I don't even ask, do you need help? Because that's too easy to say no to. I just say, how can I help?
Yeah.
And get back to me, because I'm really not good at thinking on the fly. But just say, like, how can I help? Text me tomorrow or something after you've had a time to think about it. I'm married to a husband who's a very slow decider and has been so good for me, because I'm so spur of the moment and I get myself into so much trouble saying yes to every awesome thing that comes along. But not everybody is a fast thinker and not everybody is a slow thinker. So you just have to gauge that particular person. And I just like to remember constantly, what is my goal? My goal is to love God, to enjoy my relationship with Him, and to love other people. My goal is not to make them not suffer anymore. My goal is not to get them pregnant. Like, we have a lot of good goals we want for our friends, but ultimately, the thing that I can do is love them in the middle of whatever God has for them. And I also think, like, I'm thinking to a couple different relationships that I have that have grief involved in them. And they've said, like, I like talking to you because you are willing to talk about my daughter who died. Like, other people just bring it up. And she was was a part of my life. I can't just pretend like she's not real anymore. And so I think you just have to gauge that with sensitivity. Like, is it still too soon to talk about it openly? Are they still very sensitive about it? But they were a part of life. And so they are a part of our conversation. And I think I just try to make my life one consistent thing. Like, it's the same no matter who I'm with, no matter where I am. I love God and I want to love you. And all of life is a valuable part of that experience. So I think that would be a good way to start. Do you guys have any other questions about the stuff that we watched together?
Well, I really loved just the single statement. I mean, that what you were talking about with the depression, but
Okay.
just to come back to this over and over again, is depression is the evidence of a greater problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because so often we just want to help you feel better today, and they just want to be feeling better. But I mean, as counselors, we really need to say, we want you to feel better, but we want the best for you, which is to deal with this greater problem. And I know they can come in and just go, just help me today, just help me get me through one day. But we want to do more, you know. And this, just to think of this, is that depression is the evidence of a greater problem. I just really like that statement, how you said that. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. It's such a hard thing to balance, because sometimes, like, if that person is really depressed and they're like, they have no hope, then what they need that day is like the ability to not think suicidally. So that moment will be handled in this one way. But the person who is chronically always just kind of like Eeyore, like always depressed, there's always something wrong. Like, it's very helpful and important for them to see the bigger picture of life. Like, and oh yes, it was I'm trying to think of which session I taught that in, the creation, fall, redemption, response. Yes, that was in the depression one. Mm-hmm. It's really helpful. And I teach that a lot, because too many times we just talk about the gospel, which is step 3 in the whole big step, the 5-step process. The gospel is important, but if they don't have a context where it fits in, it's just like random, nebulous, mystical gospel. And so the gospel is the answer to the fall, and it's the hope for the present. Like, the restoration that's coming is so exciting. And for a depressed person, it helps to give them some context. For example, like, some parts of life are just terrible. They're bad. Mm-hmm. And you can't just say, love Jesus and put a smile on your face, because they're going to stink until the day that you die, possibly. But what can give you hope in the middle of that really hard stuff is the fact that restoration is coming. And I even do a timeline sometimes, like, to help them get a better gauge on eternity. Like, pretend there's a line written around the whole entire room and it never starts and never stops. That's eternity. Your life is like a blip on that line. And this event is a blip on the blip on that line. But we were created for eternity. And so while, yes, we're not taking away the pain of this moment, we're seeing it in the bigger context. But that moment is shaping you for your whole capacity to enjoy all of eternity. So we're not making it nothing. We're also not making it everything. Kind of like what Amy said about the infertility and the miscarriage. Like, it's not nothing. Oh, actually, that was Bev. It's not nothing, and it's not everything. Help them to see that in a balanced way.
We were talking about that little blip. She gave an example too, Kim did. And I was talking about, this light suffering, Paul called it, compared to eternity. But to give them that verse and they're going, light, this is not light. How would you describe that word light to them? Is there any other way to, as a practical today word?
I would say temporary.
Temporary, okay.
Not light as in the opposite of heavy, because grief is heavy.
Yes, that's what I was thinking too.
Temporary heaviness in relation to permanent lightness. And so you're always, you're helping them to remember this life is not all there is to it. And also, that 2 Corinthians 4 passage, it's not the only verse in the chapter. Like, that whole thought begins in 2 Corinthians 3 and it goes until 5. And so that light and momentary troubles is in the context of all of those, like, 2.5 chapters. And so you can't just pull one verse out and be like, there you go, healed. You minister the truth. You say, this is where it starts. God is saying, yes, you are in a jar of clay body. It's crumbling. It's falling apart. It hurts when pieces fall off. But that being true, it's in the context of eternity. And then in 2 Corinthians 5, that's why you can use the rest of your life to cry out to others. Be reconciled with God, because you acknowledge the pain of your current existence and the hope of your future existence. And so you can be useful during your days on earth and not just be like consumed with the pain or oblivious to real difficulty on earth.
Okay. And being useful during your depression even.
Yeah. And like the second part of 2 Corinthians 5 is just full of ways to be useful. So that would be a good portion to read with them really slowly. I don't know what you guys find in your counseling, but when I ask counselees to read scripture, they just kind of like fly through it really fast. And I'm like, whoa, we need to back up. Like, this is the holy word of God, our creator. And we need to slowly read what he's saying in this passage, because it's the key for helping you. So sometimes it's not only just getting them to slow down, it's teaching them what it means. And so are you guys familiar with BibleHub.com?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I use that all the time, even in counseling, especially like virtual counseling is awesome because I can pull tools up on the screen at the same time. But Bible Hub will let you go to the original language. So if it's 2 Corinthians 5, it will let you pull up the Greek, and it will let you click on every word in the Greek lexicon, and it shows you the definition of what light and momentary means. So you can say, let's go slow. Let's look at what this verse is actually saying, and then let's think about it. Let's understand what it means. It's like, and then how can we apply it to your life? It's like, I don't think very many people are very good at studying the Bible in our current age. I don't even think they know how to study the Bible. So a lot of my counseling time is like teaching them how to study so that we can study.
Right.
That's a super helpful tool, though.
And I've also given a passage for homework and said, each day pull out one verse that really, speaks to your heart, and then we talk about it at the session too, which is very helpful because you can see their heart a little bit better that way. Especially if they write it down more than once, the same verse.
And that verse they're pulling out and holding on to, it just like that, the 2 Corinthians passage, like they may not know that one verse was part of a bigger thought, and they need to read the whole thought, not just pull out the one verse. When I was studying for my master's, we studied Freud, and one of the things, it was in a Christian school, so we studied Freud in the context of our understanding of biblical counseling. Mm-hmm. And one of Freud's greatest rebuttals against Christianity was that he said Christians used God like a Band-Aid. And so he said human development happens when your pain level is at like a 9 or 10. 9 or 10 is like, I'm about to die. 7 or 8 is pretty bad. But 3 to 5, like 3 to 6, 4 to 6, that's like a useful level of tension. There's enough tension and pain in your life that you have to deal with stuff. And he said, Christians try to live in 1 through 3 level of tension. And their solution is to paste God onto their life because he's the God of peace who makes their life not have any bad feelings. It was really helpful to hear that rebuttal from Freud against Christianity, because that is true. A lot of Christians live in the 1 to 3 zone of tension. And like, you know what? We don't want to encourage anyone to live at 9 to 10. Their brain's going to blow up. But like 7 to 8 level of tension, that's what 2 Corinthians 4 and 5 is talking about. Like, life is hard. It's in this body full of weakness, yet there's a lot of good that can come from it. So Christians have this propensity, especially uneducated, undiscerning Christians, of pulling a verse out of context, meditating on it, thinking about it, because it makes them feel good.
Mhm.
And that may not have even been the point of that verse at all. It might not have been a comfort verse. It might have been a conviction verse, but they're just making themselves not feel pain. That's the same thing that drug users do. They use a drug so they don't feel a certain way, or they use a drug in order to feel a certain way. And I just can't imagine anything more offensive to God than taking his word and using it like a drug. Like, that's false peace. Like, I have to have peace devoid of my circumstances, not peace in the middle of my circumstances. Awesome. Okay, any other questions or observations you had about our sessions? I wrote down a couple of thoughts too. Although now the 3 sessions are smushing together in my brain.
Yeah.
What is the first one? What that was the second one. Let me just I have to remind myself. The first one, ministering to the sexually abused. What stood out in that session to you?
I liked when she said it doesn't have to be her decisive narrative. Don't let it define her life. I think that I have had some 3 specific young women that I worked with in the last few years that were abused as children, and we're just sharing it for the first time. And I really like that it doesn't have to define her life. Yes, it happened. Yes, it was terrible. I hate it. God hates that happened. But how are we going to let God use it? And where are you going now? Because you're not back there, and
Yep.
you don't have to live there. So I really like that.
I also liked when she was talking about biblical anger in relation to it. Like, it's good to be angry for this. This is worth being angry about, but how do you actually, what's the right way to be angry? So still the freedom to be angry, like that's the correct emotion for this, but like, how do you make that?
Yeah.
What do you do with it?
And both of those comments, think about those 2 comments when we watch the Generations episode this afternoon with Mrs. Ellen, Dr. Ellen, because especially in the millennial generation, your past sexual abuse is your identity. And it's the whole Me Too movement where you are known by how you've been mistreated. And like, for the whole generation that's super Instagram heavy, like, your life becomes the Me Too hashtag. So there is no part of you other than your identity being wrapped up in the fact that you too were a victim of some other man's unlawful use of their power. So in our culture right now, the world that most people are living in, they're going to be encouraged to make their sexual mistreatment be who they are, and it becomes a badge of honor. So I think we have to treat that really carefully in counseling, that we're not saying stop talking about it, it means nothing, but we're also saying stop talking about it because it's not everything. And so that balancing of how do you handle a real, true, horrible evil that happened to you without making it the only thing you ever talk about or identify yourself as.
Yeah.
Okay, other comments about that first session?
Well, I'm not sure if this was the first session or not, but I think it was but I was thinking about shame and how Hebrews 12:2 talks about, despising the shame. Jesus walked to the cross. And I was thinking about how he refused to accept the shame that the crowd wanted to place upon him.
Oh, that's
interesting. To the cross with no shame. And I actually got this from a little booklet that I don't have anymore. I gave to somebody, I don't have it, and I can't remember who wrote it. But it was so good to think about. And we did the emotions book. I can't remember.
Untangling Emotions.
Untangling Emotions, yeah. And so that it's very helpful for you to not put the emotions that other people want to place upon you and living your life that way.
Yeah.
So this was very helpful to think of that.
One comment I had about the first session was that it was a really good overview of sexual abuse, but there's a lot that additional that you could learn about helping someone who has been sexually abused, especially a child. I work with some adults that were trafficked when they were children, and they were trafficked by their parents. And the level of dehumanization that goes along with that is just a different level, and you probably need to study that in addition. Those general sexual abuse, like someone that's been raped one time is going to handle that suffering differently than someone who had that as a regular part of their existence and was subjected at the hand of their parents. So be cautious to not just band-aid people when they say that they've been sexually abused. I would say the questions like that you consider asking. She had 4 questions listed. I would say I probably have 400 questions that I ask when I'm counseling someone who's been abused. And so one of the girls that I'm working with right now, her parents gaslit her so bad. They coordinated the circumstances and then used the circumstances that they coordinated against her in order to help her to not trust her own evaluation of anything. So we had to do sexual assault stuff, but we also had to do like, how are you functioning mentally? Like, why do you not trust people? So there's a lot of layers involved. And I would say, I never feel like 4 questions is adequate. I ask so many questions when I'm counseling someone who has been sexually abused. Okay, let's look at soul crushing, experiencing miscarriage and infertility. Anything else about that particular session?
Yeah, add one more thing to the sex abuse. I worked with a young lady who was abused by her stepdad when she was little, and actually it was really a mix of not only was she being abused, but she got the idea that her younger sister was going to be abused, and so sometimes she would offer herself to protect her. So there was that factor. And then when she finally got out of her home, told her grandmother, the mom's mother, what had happened. And the grandmother, this is in another culture, another country, in South America, because we were missionaries, but the grandmother told her, your stepdad has taken care of you all these years. Don't bring it up. And so she said, I have forgiven my stepdad for what he did. I have a hard time forgiving my grandma for not backing me and giving me what I needed at that time. And she had to, as far as I know, to this day, she hasn't told her mother or her husband about what happened. But I thought that was an interesting factor, that she had already forgiven the perpetrator, but she was having a hard time forgiving the grandma who she loved and lived with, so that's something we have to think too. There's a lot of things to
so many relationships involved, and like it's very rare to find especially a repeated perpetrator that was able to do that without anyone's knowledge. It takes so much covering to be able to repeatedly perpetrate against someone. And so there's generally layers of people involved, both the perpetrator and the victim. And I'm in a situation right now where the girl was able to acknowledge the wickedness that her father had done. And in her mind, she convinced that her mom hadn't been involved. But as she's gotten older and remembers a couple of things, she realized that her mom was actually coordinating it for her dad. And so now there's a new level of counseling that's required to work through the thoughts about the mom. So I don't think it's an easy topic. There are many, many layers involved. I think that's why we're warned against sexual sin so strongly. It affects our understanding of who we are as human beings at a very, very core level. Yeah.
Thanks for letting me share that.
Sure, of course. Okay, what about the second session on miscarriage and infertility?
The statement that I wrote that I most liked from that was near the end, she said that we want to get closer to Jesus in some convenient and controllable way. And I thought that is true in lots of areas, not just dealing with that, but the area of infertility, when I, many years ago, I had a stillbirth. And when I had that, the doctors told me, or I read in the literature, that 1 out of 5 pregnancies, not women, but 1 in 5 pregnancies end in miscarriage or stillbirth. And I was surprised. That's a lot. And so there's a lot of women that have gone through it that haven't maybe shared. So they're all over. And
Yeah.
so something to be sensitive to. I think like Mother's Day, baby shower, all those occasions, we just have to be really careful. And I don't know how many times before I went through that I said, when are you guys going to have a baby? Because I love babies and I was so happy. And I don't know how many times I might have done that to people that we would love to and we can't, but they didn't say it.
I always think about that topic, the whole when you guys going to have a baby question, like this. Would I walk up to them and ask them about their sex life? No.
Right.
So I'm not going to ask them when they're going to have a product of their sex life. Like,
Right.
That's so inappropriate. But I don't think anyone thinks about it that way. And there are so many things that are going on behind that situation. Like there are so many people that you think, oh, you'd be great parents, but you have no idea why they're not parents. And
Right.
maybe one day they'll bring it up and then you guys can chat about it. But until then, they haven't welcomed me into their story. So
Right.
it's challenging though. Yeah.
Baby.
I like how heavy her focus was on grief. Like I felt like this was really a grief session, and it taught you how to just cry out in a real way. I saw a lot of cross applications between this session and just helping someone who's grieving the loss of any child. My 19-year-old daughter's 19-year-old friend was just killed about a month ago in a really tragic car accident. And I was thinking about their family a lot as I was listening. Like a lot of this truth would be very comforting to them. Like it's just the fact that you lost a child, or in the case of infertility, you lost the dream of a child.
Right.
So I saw a lot of cross application. Anything else on this one? Okay, let's talk about the third one, which was, oops, lost my spot. Helping struggle with depression. I'm looking at my notes while I talk. Okay, any questions that you have about this?
I really liked how you described 6 different people and different age groups. I mean, they're all over.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you can look anywhere and find them.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times they're so quiet about it and you don't know, what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And you can say just casually one thing and all of a sudden they cry and then they have to tell you, sometimes you just don't know what, you're surprised, that this is happening to them.
Well, thank you. That was purposeful. I made those case studies based on the book that I read by Ed Welch. He said the 6 main causes of depression, so I just made up a story for each of the 6 causes to illustrate it, just so it would be a little bit clearer. But yeah, I wanted it to be all ages, all races, all social conditions. I think depression is a common, super duper common emotion that we think of as like this rare thing that has attacked us, but it's really like a common response to us living in a crushed world with sinful tendencies and suffering in the middle of it. So,
and like the common cold, you think you're over it and it comes back again and bites you again sometimes. Something else in life, if you haven't learned to deal with depression, you think you're over it and something else jumps in and you're back there again and have to deal again.
Totally. And I was thinking about our friend whose daughter just died, and like the 2 weeks after her death were horrible. We talked about death in our family so much, just all 4 of us processing it. And I was listening to myself say the symptoms of depression, like the dictionary symptoms. And we came to a point 2 weeks after she died that we were like, okay, we need to go away. We need to get our head back in the game. Like we've spent 2 weeks thinking about nothing other than death. And like I could see, I struggled with postpartum depression after my older daughter was born, and I could see myself going back to that. And I love Jesus, and I'm a counselor.
Right.
So imagine someone who doesn't know how to read the Bible or think biblically. That descent into depression is very, very sneaky and very not observable when you're in the middle of it. So I think one thing too is like, we need to have our minds about us as we see our friends going through real life circumstances like the 6 case studies, to assume that if we don't somehow, like, that it's right and proper for us to say, I'm concerned about your transition right now as you deal with whatever. I know that it would be normal for sad feelings to develop, and I just want to let you know that I'm available. I would love to talk with you about it. I just want to be your friend to whatever degree you need a friend, because it's normal to feel weighed down by sadness in a difficult situation like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people with depression don't come for counseling because they're in bed. You know, just like, oh, and it
And
just,
stuff piling up around them.
and if
Yeah.
you're depressed, then you probably aren't going to come to church, or you're not going to, it'd be easy, even if you recognize that you need help, to cancel your appointment. And
Yeah.
no, I wasn't really up to it. I'm not feeling well.
Especially if you didn't do your homework. Like in
Yeah.
our center, you're not allowed to come if you don't do your homework, and depressed people never do their homework. Like,
Oh,
they
right.
have 1,000 things that they didn't do that week. And so, yeah.
Yeah. So you almost have to break into their depression to say, like an intervention almost.
Mm-hmm. And to let them know, like, it's normal to have sad feelings about life when life is yucky.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Okay, well, it's lunch break time, or in Emily's case, second breakfast time. So we'll be back here in about an hour to start our next videos. Okay, see you guys later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.